Sorry, what? What? I don't know how much you know about me, but I don't have anything better to do on a Sunday night except drive all the way to Barnes & Noble to find out whether or not Stephenie Meyer wrote a book about religious fundamentalism and a woman who leaves it under a pseudonym that none of us know about. I can pick out her writing a mile away, and I have to know. I have to know right now. Bookseller didn't know. Look at his sheet. I have the book, and I have an hour before I have to pick my daughter up from a birthday party. I'll report back. I've read 3 pages, and I have 3 thoughts. First, I am not going to be able to read a single word of this without wondering whether or not Stephenie Meyer wrote it, and that is obnoxious, but I will try. Secondly, it's not just Jodi Picoult that blurbed it. Samantha Irby also blurbed it on the back, and she called it smart and sexy as hell. And I just find it hard to believe that had Stephenie Meyer written it, Samantha Irby would have given it that blurb. But also, pseudonym, maybe she didn't know, but also if Stephenie Meyer wrote it, would Samantha Irby have found it sexy and smart as hell? Or smart and sexy as hell? I don't know. Third thought. It is a St. Martin's Press publisher. That is a Macmillan imprint. Stephenie Meyer is Hachette with Little Brown. Come on, guys. Let's use our deductive skills. It may not be her. Okay? Okay. Several chapters in now, it does not feel like Stephenie Meyer to me. One, the writing is super terse, and she's not terse, especially with the emotions of her characters, which is where this is the most, it's not staying in the emotions. She doesn't do that. So there's that, but there have been 2 mentions so far in 28 pages of the love interest's hair. Fox brown and the color of a burnt sienna crayon. And that tracks. So still up in the air. Okay. It looks like Corinne talk popped off last night while I was sleeping. Great. I'm excited. I'm on chapter 28. I would have gotten farther than that. Here's where I am. You can see it. Because I use the dust jacket as a bookmark. I took a NyQuil though, and so I just fell asleep last night. I have some time today to read, and I will do that, and I will keep you guys updated. And I will put the stories, the updates that I made last night in videos under this so you can see those too. Let's read Corinne together, guys. Let's do it. Let's sleuth it out. Oh, for my through chapter 28 update, it is intensely readable. One of those books that you don't really want to put down because the chapters are super short. Readability, yes, Meyer, but short chapters, no, Meyer. Okay, so update on whether or not I think Corinne by Rebecca Morrow could potentially be Stephenie Meyer under a pseudonym based on the writing style. And I'm going to say so far, 30 or so chapters in, no. There's just something about the style that's off for me. It is not reading Stephenie Meyer. For instance, the original Reddit post said that they thought it might be Stephenie, besides the idea that this is about religious fundamentalism written under a pseudonym, and she is practicing LDS. So if she wanted to write something about that, she probably wouldn't do it under her name. Other than that, there's lots of New York Times bestsellers who might do that. They mentioned the fact that the love interest's hair is described several times, and that is very true. Other than the burnt sienna crayon, he's got cherry coke hair, he's got mahogany hair and pale skin, and I understand that is reminiscent of something reading Twilight, but that's just a thing that sticks in our head about the way she wrote in Twilight. It's not a definitive thing that she does in all of her books, but one thing that she does do in all of her books is dialogue tagging. I opened to a random page in The Chemist right here, and literally she begged, he laughed, she moaned, he wondered, she suggested in the dialogue. The dialogue in this, no dialogue tags, literally just the dialogue, which I prefer, obviously. So just the way that this is written, it is not giving me Stephenie, it is giving me someone else altogether, but I'm gonna keep sleuthing because I'm really enjoying the hunt.
Who have supplied, and if this person might be Mormon, but what if it's Shannon Hale?
Hey Bethany, sorry about your migraine, hope you feel better soon. You are not the first one that I've heard say Shannon Hale. It's been in the comments, and also I think Drama Dork did a video about it, and I had friends last night, after the Stephenie Meyer news broke, and my Twilight friends and I were texting about it. One of them was I think I saw a video that said it must be Shannon Hale, and I was oh, people are just saying that because of the Austin Land connection with her. And actually, I didn't know she was formerly Mormon and like more on the side of deconstruction and Exmo and all that stuff. So maybe, but I haven't read enough Shannon Hale to know definitively like what her voice sounds like. I can definitively say what I think about Stephenie Meyer's voice and something new, and I'm leaning a certain way. So anyway, maybe, who knows? But feel better soon. Okay, almost done with Corinne. I have just a little bit left. I'm going to finish it right after eat my dinner. And I have a couple of thoughts. One, no, it could not possibly have been Rachel Hollis, nor could it have been Beth Moore or Jen Hatmaker. These are some other names that I have seen in my comments. These women write inspirational memoirs, Bible studies, spiritual, edification books, and then Rachel Hollis writes trash. That doesn't lend itself to writing really good women's fiction or romance or whatever this is going to end up being by the time I finish it. Do you know what I'm saying? That is not the same genre. That is the different skill set. And I have read almost everything Beth Moore has ever written as a former evangelical girly, used to be in the church, used to be a Beth Moore stan. I've read it all. She did not write this. Jen Hatmaker, likewise, might be fun. She might be all fun and games. She did not write this book. She did not. And Rachel Hollis didn't write anything that we're going to talk about. Okay? All right? So I wanted to throw that out there. This has made me cry. So I'm saying, different skill set. Thank you. All right, guys, I finished it. Let's talk about it. Here's what I thought of Corinne. First of all, what did I think of the book itself? I found it compulsively readable. I was not putting it down unless I had to, and that wasn't just to update you guys. That was for me. I wanted to know what was going to happen. There was some form issues that I had with it, like the repetitive nature of the names being used constantly, not just in the narrator's head, but in the prose. I mean, the words Corinne and Enoch probably appear on every single page multiple times. It's kind of annoying. I really love the heroine. I found her competent and confident, especially when she thinks that she can't be, or maybe she isn't. She steps up for herself in ways that sometimes you don't expect her to, and she pushes the narrative forward for herself. And there's definitely a lot to unpack with regard to religious trauma, leaving a faith community that you've been a part of your entire life. That's something that I've dealt with in the past several years, and so I'm sure I'll be going back to try to unpack some of the things that I read in this novel. It's definitely written by someone who understands what it's like to be outside of that type of community. Which brings me to the big mystery of this novel is, could Rebecca Morrow be Stephenie Meyer? And I'm going to go ahead and say no. No, it could not. Nobody wants to say anything definitively, but I just don't think she would have written this book, even under a pseudonym, especially because those things tend to come out. And this book is very dirty. Not the dirtiest thing I've ever read by any stretch of the imagination, but very dirty for Stephenie Meyer. And as far as I know, Stephenie Meyer is still an active member of the LDS Church, and I feel like this is written by somebody who really, truly understands what it's like to be on the outside of a high control group or a evangelical type of community. When you're still inside that type of community, you can't speak and think the way that Corinne speaks and thinks in this novel. You just can't. Not at least about the community that you've been a part of your whole life. Not to mention that the church that she's leaving is not in any way LDS. It's more like Seventh-day Adventist or a Pentecost, like a legalistic Pentecostal church. It's not Mormon. I will say that this does not really explore a loss of faith. It doesn't really have a deconstruction aspect to it. It is more about what it's like to just be cast out from a community like that because of a sin issue or because you couldn't meet their standards. And those are very different types of ways to deal with religious trauma on the page. So if anybody's looking for the loss of faith aspect to it, this is not your book. But what it is a beautiful love story that spans a couple of decades. It's worth reading. So I don't know who wrote it. I'm not really interested in figuring that out anymore since I don't think it's Stephenie Meyer. If you want to talk about it in the comments or in your own content, feel free. But I still think you should pick it up. It was great. And excellent marketing by whoever started that Reddit thread. So I just woke up, I'm scrolling my comments this morning, and I see this gem right here, and I'm going to be coming at you, bedhead, haven't had my coffee yet. I'm going to get the book off my shelf where I put books that I finish just to tell you why it can't be John Green. I haven't even finished my coffee this morning. I had to prove you people wrong. Full disclosure, I love John Green. A+ man. John and Hank Green, right up there. They're great. But John Green didn't write this shit. Gideon the Ninth would agree with me. Another disclaimer, spoilers for Corinne by Rebecca Morrow, and also we're going to be talking about a couple of adult themes, so 18 plus only, okay? Thanks. Okay, so Enoch and Corinne have just slept together for not the first time, but, kind of, and they're talking about it, and he's asking her if she arrived, and she's like, no, and he's like, well, do you want to? They're having this great little communicative thing, and he's like, I can watch you do it to yourself, you can do that. She's like, yeah, and he's like, well, I'm good with my hands, I can figure it out, and she's like, you're great with your hands, I'd let you operate on me, but this just wouldn't work, I'm dysfunctional, and he's like, but you can make yourself do it. She's like, yeah, always, repeatedly, and he says, well, does it have something to do with trust? What's the deal? And finally, she says this to him, I think it's like I need to respond immediately to my own feedback. And he says, like a closed circuit? And she's like, I guess so. And then later on, she's telling him how the act itself often feels better to her than arriving. And he's like, how is that possible? And she's like, I don't know. That's just how I feel. This conversation is so great and so important. And it helped to prove my point that a woman who was probably raised in purity culture and deals with like some of the things that happen in your brain about sex, wrote this, because that is such a female understanding of female sexuality. Sometimes women that have a hard time arriving with a partner, it's not about shame, it's not about performance, it's not about like only focusing on the man, it's just because it's easier in your own body to do the thing. And not to mention that a lot of times the act itself is just as pleasurable or sometimes even more so than the finale. That's a female understanding. That's female gaze. And I just don't think John Green, smart guy that he is, smart little guy that he is, would be able to write it like that. Even the male character's response when he says like a closed circuit, that's a male character trying to understand what this female author wants to say. That's a female understanding of what she's talking about. So if you read Corinne, I have more I want to say. I had a video in my drafts that I just didn't post because I couldn't come up with a satisfactory ending, and I decided to just let you guys hash it out in the comments. So let's talk about it. Spoilers for the end of this book. So originally I thought this book was meant to be women's fiction, or lit fic, but with a female perspective. So they always throw it in women's fiction. And then as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, is it going to be romance? And I literally was waiting till the last page and whether or not Corinne and Enoch got a happily ever after to decide whether or not this was lit fic, women's fiction, or romance. And I'm still not sure how it's meant to be categorized. It's definitely not marketed as a romance. You have to admit that, if nothing else. And yet the entire book is about Enoch and Corinne. That is the entire story. It's about their relationship, and the end is a happily ever after. It's not even a happy for now. They're married and together at the end. But it's missing that thing that makes romance novels what they are. And I think that that's joy. There's none of that really. The book was super readable, unput downable. And that's because I needed to know where it was headed, because the ending wasn't assured like it is when you're reading romance. And if they had marketed it as such, I'm not sure I would have felt the need to keep going, because it was missing the joyous moments that romance tend to have that make you want to keep going so that you can get more of that butterfly feeling. Not to mention, Corinne is pretty set in her ways. She's grown as a person almost fully in 2005 when we meet her. She's already decided to come back and be with her family. She knows how she feels about the church and knows she's not going to go into it. She knows she doesn't want to have children and raise them. And all of this stuff is who she is already. And she doesn't move from that path or grow beyond it, even when she gets together with Enoch. So still trying to suss out whether or not this book is romance, women's fiction, lit fic, I'm still unable to do it, because despite the literal HEA at the end, it's still kind of bleak. The fact that she's alone in the bed waiting for him to come back from an intensely patriarchal system doesn't feel like a romance ending to me. It feels like a sad one. I was texting with a friend who is a very popular romance author, and she said it's missing the escapist energy, and that's very true. So, if you have read Corinne, please let me know what you think. Is it romance? Is it lit fic? Is it women's fiction? Tell me. Thank you for asking this question, because it made me realize that despite the fact that I, am a former Christian who deconstructed a long time ago and like reads constantly, I don't have a lot of like great faith deconstruction, loss of faith books in my history of reading. It's just not something that I've found and been like, this is the book. But I have a lot of books where certain aspects of them did affect my deconstruction, or they impacted me directly, or even rereading them was helpful. So I'm going to give you all of the recs that I can think of off my shelves right this minute. And I'll tell you how they were helpful. You need to reread The Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. Just what she says about God in this, especially if you're coming from a fundamentalist evangelical background, you need to reread it after you've deconstructed out of that. Likewise, the Night trilogy. We all know that Elie Wiesel wrote Night. I hate the cover. It's got this horrible sticker I never got off correctly. But you should read the entire trilogy for loss of faith deconstruction purposes. If you've never read American Gods, you should. The understanding of old gods and new, and why we worship what we do, and what this says about that, it's indelible, and you should read it. The Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson is the first Brandon Sanderson I've ever read. He is a practicing Mormon, so I've heard, but there are elements of how religion is developed and how it evolves and why we worship what we do in this that I found extremely illuminating after I lost my faith, so I would suggest this as well. Autobiography by Christina Lauren, who are my good friends. This book is about a bisexual boy who ends up in Provo, Utah, and falls in love with a bishop's son in the Mormon church, and it is about their love story, and it has a lot of religious themes in it that are incredibly important. If you're deconstructing, you're interested in that, it's really great. In the erotica realm, you really need to read Sierra Simone's Priest series. Priest, Sinner, Saint, and Midnight Mass is the novella that goes with Priest. There are incredibly important motifs in all of these about faith and sexuality, losing your faith, why we have faith, where it goes when we do lose it or when we choose to leave church, and plus they're super hot and wonderful, and they also deal with a lot of other issues. I'd been a fan of Sierra Simone for years. I read Priest the day it came out, but when she quoted Richard Rohr in Saint, I was like, forever a stan. He's a Franciscan friar who really helped with my deconstruction, so. And finally, I've suggested these a million times, but the original Sinner series by Stephenie Meyer, this is just the first series. The Siren has some of the best theological principles that I've ever read in fiction, and it's about an erotica author and a BDSM club, and still made me cry. And I read those very early on in my deconstruction process, and they really meant a lot to me. So go forth, read. Okay, I thought that it seemed very familiar too. And then I realized that the font, the cover of the book, plus just the single feminine name, Corinne, and then the author as Rebecca Morrow, I think it's meant to pay homage to Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Obviously, I don't have any thing to back that up, that thought, but it is the first thing that I thought of when I saw the book. So I heard about the book first on the internet, and then as soon as I got to the store and saw the cover and saw the name Rebecca Morrow and the font and just everything, I was just like, this is reminding me of Rebecca. So I don't know what that means, but there you go.